Pharaoh was fast approaching, and the people of Israel could see his army in the distance. Fear caused a panic among the people, and a roar of terror fell upon the entire group. They cried out to God and turned to Moses in a frightened frenzy. "We have no graves in Egypt. Is that why you took us out here to die in the wilderness?" they said. "Didn't we ask you to just leave us alone to be slaves? Now we are going to die here." They were panicking, and fear was beginning to consume them like fire to paper. Moses stood up for everyone to see. God had gotten them this far, and he was not about to succumb to the slavery of fear. "Fear not," Moses shouted. "The salvation of the Lord will work for you this day." Moses spoke, as if a general in an army. He pointed towards the fast-approaching Egyptian horde and shouted, "These Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord will fight for you. Be silent and watch his glory unfold." As Moses was still speaking, God spoke to him, saying, "Why do you cry to me? Go and tell people to move forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand towards the sea." After speaking to Moses, the angel of God descended violently in the distance, and the pillar of smoke that guided Israel rushed towards the army. The cloud shrouded them in darkness and came between the armies of Egypt and the captives of Israel. As the night drew close, the cloud lit up with fire. Moses did as God commanded. People watched curiously as Moses walked towards the waters. Silence fell upon the crowd as Moses inhaled deeply and looked to the sky. He remembered the words of God on Mount Sinai. "Take this staff, and with it you will do my wonders," God had once told him. Moving his gaze towards the sea, Moses outstretched his arms with the staff in his right hand. A cold wind blew violently from the east around him, and the seas began to rush to and fro. The wind howled at night, and the waters danced as the seas began to split in half. Moses' hands were lifted in the air, and all of Israel stood in awe of the wonders of their Lord. All of Israel went into the midst of the sea and walked through on dry ground. The waters surrounded them like two walls on the right and the left. Thousands of God's redeemed people stumbled through the alleyways of the divided seas, and Pharaoh's army began descending to capture them. Pharaoh's army, chariots and horsemen, pursued them into the split seas. As they closed the gap between them and Israel, God's pillar of fire and cloud threw them into a panic. Their horses fell and their chariots crumbled. The army looked up and the waters began to sway back and forth above them. The waters fell like a crumbling wall, and the Egyptians were swallowed up by the raging waters. Not one of them remained, and Pharaoh's hardened heart dissolved in the darkness of the deep sea. The people of Israel looked upon the seas on the other side, safe, not one of them being harmed. Egyptian bodies began to wash up on the shore. The Lord had been their champion once again, and saved them from the hand of the Egyptians. A reverent, thankful, and healthy fear of God came upon them, and they truly believed he was their Redeemer and leader. They sang, danced, and celebrated God and Moses. Then they departed into the wilderness, hopeful for greater things. 3 days had passed, and the heat of the eastern sun beat down on the men, women, and children of Israel. They groaned under the sun, for they had ran out of drinking water. When they had come to Marah, there was a vast reservoir big enough to satisfy the entire group. However, the water was bitter and poisonous. "What shall we drink?" they mumbled to Moses, like children looking to their father. Moses turned to the Lord, also thirsty and feeling helpless to satisfy the people's needs. God showed Moses a dead tree to be thrown into the water. The sap from the log drew the mineral content down to the bottom of the pools, leaving good water for the people to drink. God had saved them from slavery and now satisfied their needs. Not long after, the Israelites ran out of food to eat. Hungry and growing more and more angry, they grumbled again to Moses, saying, "At least in Egypt we had food." God heard their complaints, and instead of resenting them, he provided for them. God spoke to Moses, telling him that he was going to provide them food, but the food would come with instructions. For God did not want his people to be gluttonous and entitled to blessings. He knew that if he provided them food without any parameters, they would grow fat and lazy. "I will send bread down from heaven. I will provide enough for everyone to eat, but they shall only take what is needed and no more. If they take too much, the food will spoil. And on the 6th day I will provide a double portion to be saved for the Sabbath." Moses told the people, although he was annoyed at their constant complaining. So the people waited. At twilight, a flock of quail came towards their camp, and at night they feasted on meat. They slept well-fed and happy. In the morning they awoke to a flake-like substance laced on the ground like frost. It was thin and unknown to the people of Israel. "What is it?" they asked. So they named it manna, which means what? As God instructed, most people gathered only what they needed, while others took more and watched it spoil. So began the providing relationship between God and his people. The days would be long, and the weeks would be longer, yet God continued to take care of his children.